look, back to education. I can't. This gets worse every day, and I just thought we'd hear another person's perspective. We are in more than a crisis here. Parents, believe me, and students, if you're watching me here, we've got state education ministers around the country telling us everything's terrific. In New South Wales, this Sarah Mitchell gives every indication of not having a clue about what's going on, and other state ministers are just rubber stamps. Yet there's a massive slide in international league tables across Australia. We are performing appallingly. As Mark Latham and I have said, our young people have lost their greatest assets, innocence and a sense of fun. When we went to school, you and I, we weren't burdened with adult-type issues. Now young people, even in primary school, can be, as Mark Latham said last week, hit with questions of political debate and controversy that adults are struggling to deal with. Our schools, he said, are full of teaching of Black Lives Matter, colonisation theory, Invasion Day theory, Greta Thunberg theory, gender and sexual fluidity. And this has led to concerns about mental illness in our kids in schools. Meanwhile, history, geography, maths, spelling, tables are all left behind. But while the Teachers Federation website is full of political content, the Minister says we shouldn't have politics in our classrooms. The question of political content, moral teaching, social teaching, that's the preserve of parents. Dr. Kevin Donnelly is a senior research fellow at the Australian Catholic University. He makes the point that radical gender theory is all pervasive, but it's not just radical gender theory. Let's go to Kevin Donnelly. Now, this stuff I find alarming. Dr. Donnelly, thank you for your time. Firstly, do parents understand that schools are allowing students to change their name without telling parents that university and schools in Melbourne are asking students to wear rainbow-coloured gay, lesbian and transgender-themed clothes? And as you've said, it's a strange day in politics when Mark Latham, an ex-leader of the Australian Labor Party, dedicated to democratic socialism, is more conservative when it comes to this neo-Marxist-inspired gender theory than supposedly conservative Liberal governments led by Prime Minister Morrison and Premier Berejiklian.
You're dead right, Alan, and I can't work it out what's happening. I mean, years ago, I was a conservative. I joined the Liberal Party years ago. I always thought that the Liberal Party believed in family values, in raising children, in education, to learn, to be educated in terms of the benefits of Western culture, that they would have a rigorous academic education. There wouldn't be this indoctrination, this political correctness. Now, whether it's gender theory, whether it's climate change, whether it's multiculturalism, we now have a national curriculum under a Liberal Conservative government, which is actually worse than what it was 4 or 5 years ago when I co-chaired the review of the national curriculum.
Well, I mean, Mark Latham's championing legislation to give parents the right to say no to schools, which tells students that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. I mean, where do parents fit in to all of this? And Mark Latham is talking about winding back the creep of gender fluidity ideologies in New South Wales schools and re-establishing the primacy of parents. But where are our political leaders shouting this stuff? I haven't heard a word from any one of them.
Again, you're right, and it's very disturbing. I mean, there are 1 or 2 Liberal politicians. Claire Chandler I met in Hobart last week. She's very strong, opposing transgenderism. There are 1 or 2 of them, but unfortunately they're not the majority. And I've always argued that parents are their primary educators for their children. Parents have the moral responsibility.
They do.
It shouldn't be done by the state. The government, it's very Orwellian, like
Yes.
Big Brother 1984.
Well, let me just
the government is taking over.
Kevin, let me take this transgender thing. Now, when we're talking and being critical of the Morrison government, the Australian government's own Department of Education, Skills and Employment Wellbeing website advertises a booklet championing radical gender theory. And students are told they have the right to, quote, identify as either male or female or both. And students are told that gender, this is the Commonwealth government, the Morrison government's own booklet, told that gender is a social construct, not biologically determined. And the booklet tells students they have the right to decide what gender they want to be and parents aren't told. And the booklet says the person who understands most about their gender transition or affirmation is the student, and that it may be possible to consider a student a mature minor and able to make decisions without parental consent. Dr. Donnelly, this is an Australian government document.
It's appalling, and you might remember, Alan, a couple of years ago, there was a review of this material, which has been produced by Safe Schools. It goes back to La Trobe University.
Yep.
It goes back to Ros Ward, who actually admitted it was nothing about anti-bullying. It was about a neo-Marxist inspired view of gender and sexuality to overthrow the family, to overthrow religion, Christianity. It's a very powerful...
It's in schools.
The
it's
long
in
march
schools.
through the institutions.
Parents, can you listen? The guidelines issued by the New South Wales government, Berejiklian government, to principals undermines the right guaranteed by international agreements that parents have, as their children's guardians, responsibility for the upbringing of their children. But if a student, according to this document, wishes to change his or her name, principals are told in the guidelines, quote, if either or both parents object to the change to the way the first name is recorded by the school, the principal needs to make a decision about what is in the child's best interests. Kevin Donnelly, what the hell does that mean?
It gets worse, Alan. I mean, I looked at the material closely, as you have. One of the things that most upset me is that if a school has one student who wants to transition for whatever reason, a boy who wants to be a girl, for example, they're now saying they should be able to use the girls' changing rooms, the girls' toilets. Offensive. And any parent or even any student who disagrees with that, if you're a student, the majority of students would be uncomfortable. Yes. They're to be re-educated by the school,
and the parents aren't entitled to know.
Theory.
And the parents aren't entitled to know. Now, seriously, I don't know. Kevin, good to talk to you, but I'll tell you what, the fight is on, and it's a fight that must be won. Thank you for the contribution you're making to it, but this is extraordinary stuff. Isolating parents from what in fact is happening to children, it's unthinkable. But I'll tell you what, this is the world we're starting to inhabit.